it's our friend. Yeah, the Berlin Open Lab, I'm going to tell you a bit about the concept, like in 20 minutes, and then Bodo will have a kind of a little guided tour through this infrastructure, because he started together with me, I think it was already, to be honest, 5 years ago. It's amazing. So I was just browsing through the first concepts. It was 2014 that we started talking about the first idea. So universities take a bit longer than we expect to take, but these were the first kind of ideas where we came up with this idea of having a new space of interdisciplinary research. And Bodo was working through all this time to understand what are the constraints, what are the requirements of very different people working in this kind of new space. I will start with an image of that I took during my sabbatical. I was traveling in different African countries. I was traveling to South Africa, to Ghana, and to Togo. And one of the most impressive spaces that I saw there is Agobloshi. So Agobloshi is in Accra in Ghana, is the biggest e-waste dump, trash yard in the whole world. So it's hell. So just to be very blunt, it's not just a kind of trash yard, but it's a city based on electronic waste, and all the kind of stuff, you know, the used mobile phones, the computers, washing machines, whatever, is just kind of shipped to this trash yard. And it's totally toxic. People are living there and trying to make something out of those kind of leftovers, and they are just burning kind of cables to get the copper out of it. And so it's a really disgusting place. But on this place, there's a makerspace, and we were visiting this Agobloshi makerspace, and it's tiny, but still it is kind of also a sign of hope. And it also symbolizes for me this idea of maybe the hope of this kind of digital society, of this maker culture, of this open source community, because what they want to do with this Agobloshi makerspace is provide access to knowledge, provide access to online resources, and provide the knowledge how to make upcycling processes, how to make, for example, a 3D printer out of e-waste. So these are very concrete plans that they are providing there, and people go to this makerspace on the Agobloshi trash yard to make something on their own, maybe to think in this kind of terms of a bit neoliberalism, innovation spaces. But still, it is a very good approach, I think. So they provide internet access, they provide tools to really make something, but also kind of the resources. And there were some of the people were very very well trained how to do innovation processes, and they said they got their knowledge from YouTube. So this is, they were part of this global network of makerspaces, and they have their tutorials on YouTube, and they are sharing these kind of resources. And so this is kind of a real access to this network for the people that are living there. With all problems that are there, with all challenges, it's very fragile. It's not very well funded, of course, and all these kind of problems that there are. So it's not the solution. I would never say this, but it's at least one step and one understanding of these kind of two phases that we have when we're talking about digital society. And when I was visiting many of those kind of places and spaces and maker spaces through my sabbatical, to understand what are the potentials of spaces and infrastructures in terms of giving access to knowledge, and maybe also because I kind of grew up in my studies in the 90s with this idea of the internet provides access to knowledge to everybody. It could be a place of basic democracy, of reinventing democratic participation. All these kinds of beautiful ideas that came up in the 90s, and I wanted to understand whether in these kind of places it is a kind of real narration, there's a real potential for having this kind of access, or whether it is just a dream, or maybe also just a kind of, let's say, marketing, because some of those places do beautiful websites, beautiful pictures, and when you visit them, it's just, there's just the idea, but maybe not so much behind. So in these kind of times, how should we think about the spaces and infrastructures for research at the University of the Arts? So what's the kind of setting that we need to have to address big challenges that are occurring, and wicked problems that are occurring in a digital society? So we need to change our mode of researching fundamentally. We have to be much quicker, we have to address these kind of holistic problems, we have to be, of course, interdisciplinary, we have to be, in a way, very experimental, to really try out things and understand it through the making. This is our approach as designers, and how we learn these kind of approaches and how we share our resources based on this kind of maker culture is one of our topics that we address in the Weizenbaum Institute. So the Weizenbaum Institute for the Network Society is a big research institution that started 1.5 years ago here in Berlin, and we have one research team working on the digital production possibilities of the maker culture. And another one where Bianca is the head of is also addressing digital sovereignty and equality and inequality of access. So these kind of topics on our agenda, and through this we also try to understand, what are the circumstances and the requirements for doing research. We're talking very much about values, and also together with the Einstein Center for Digital Future, which is another big research endeavor here in Berlin, we talk about what's the fundamental assumptions that we have when we do research in the digital society. So we have different big challenges that we need to address. For example, digitization for everyone. This is a value for us. So we see a widening digital divide globally. So not just between younger and older people, but also between, of course, we in the global north and global south. We see a widening social divide in terms of, who is gaining and who's on the winning team of digitization, and who is just kind of left behind and totally feels left behind. And so this is a big social problem caused by technological dynamics that we are, not understanding very well where it's heading to. And so our aim is to include everyone in the digital transformation, to give access to people, and from their very different and very individual starting points. So we are talking very much about inclusion, for example, and are working together with people. One example is we were having a project some years ago with deaf-blind people, so people who cannot hear and cannot see. And we thought, it's very challenging for them to be part of this also communication and social network of the internet. And we found a solution. So it was, in a way, very easy. So people who are deaf-blind, they have a kind of hand-touch alphabet. It's called the LOM alphabet. So if I would be deaf-blind, I would have to go to each one of you and type into your hand the LOM alphabet, what I want to say. So A, I, E, O, U. So I can LOM, and you would have to be familiar with the LOM alphabet. I would have to stand next to you and type into your hand. So very cumbersome. So we developed a glove and just put on those kinds of touch points pressure sensors. So I type into my glove what I want to say, and you get an email or a message or a voice message. And you could be anywhere globally. And you also send a message via email or whatever to my glove, and it's spelled into my hand with little vibration motors. So it's a kind of translation tool that is very easy from a technology point of view, but huge in the impact, because you can follow the mobile lawn glove on Twitter now. So deaf-blind people have access to social media now, and deaf-blind people can, through this little device, read all the news on the internet and be part of this global society. So there are ways to include people and to learn from their expertise, because we didn't know how do deaf-blind people communicate. We just didn't know. But they told us and they taught us how this is going, and this is working, and so we understood human-computer interaction in a better way, and these are very pragmatic tools to make this kind of inclusion really happening. So include everyone in digital society and transformation. What we do here also is, of course, open discussions, public hackathons, and also policy roundtables, because I also personally, I think that we have to engage much more into policy making. So we have, many challenges. Also, we know all about what's happening currently in the political parties in Germany. It's crazy. And we know about the European elections, and the European elections showed us very well that there's totally a missing link between the young generation, who's very engaged into climate change and has their own formats to engage and to do political discussions and debates, and it's totally not linked to any kind of political policy making and to political parties. So we have a widening gap there also. And I think we as researchers and also as design researchers very much, we maybe understand specific parts of the digital society very, very well, and so we also should engage in dialogues with policy making, because we should not draw a strict line and say, no, we just do research and the rest is up to you, but we should really go back and forth to understand those global challenges and really engage into those kind of debates. So for example, we had, I think 2 weeks ago, a first kind of open discussion with the Weizenbaum Institute, where we were talking about African perspectives. So we had different research groups who were making different kind of projects in ICT for development context, for example, and we were exchanging just our views, how we understand, how we link to different communities. So what's also from our European settings, so how can we learn much more also from different African countries and communities and projects that we are doing there. Digitization beyond silos, so of course we know it spans topics and expertise in a new way, and how do we understand this also as universities? So how can we maybe think also, this is a big discussion with the Einstein Center Digital Future, think about a faculty beyond silos, think about a new generation of faculty. In Berlin, this is very specific because we have so many universities like the Humboldt University, Freie Universität, Technical University, and University of the Arts. And now they started, like over the last kind of 10 years, they started really collaborating. Surprise, because before this did not happen at all. And we are on the same campus as Technical University, so the next building is Technical University. So it should be quite easy, but in practice it is hard. But this space is already together Technical University and University of the Arts. So we share already this space, and we need to do this much more and focus on the topics, not on the kind of the barriers of the university, but have those kind of challenges as guidance for our research agenda. And this is what we try to explore here. Human-centered digitization, so understand digitization in service of humans and strengthening human rights and welfare. This seems to be kind of very obvious, but of course it isn't, because on my sabbatical I went from Togo to China, and I spent some time at Tongji University in Shanghai. And I had some very pragmatic experiences also with a social scoring system and with this kind of really big dynamic in digital transformation and innovation, how surveillance technology is used, how AI is implemented in the whole system, how how limited is the access to the internet, and it's getting worse and worse. And so putting this on our agenda on a very high priority is very important. Also for us as researchers, also for us as a European community, maybe to put this on a European digital agenda, that this is our understanding. And it also has much to do also, of course, with sustainability, with social sustainability, but also ecological and economical sustainability, that we don't do just this economic turn and just to try to copy Google or Alibaba or whatever. So we won't do the job anyway, so maybe we should find alternatives. Easy access to trustworthy and diversified information, also of course in times of fake news, so we should do this as research institutions and make sure that we follow this agenda. Provisioning of non-patronizing freedom of decision, supporting and privacy-preserving services. So also implement these kinds of values into those kinds of environments that we have here, and to understand that this is the basic for our doing, and really check twice always when we create those kinds of interactions that we follow these kind of values. And of course, participation in governance, a sort of non-discriminative treatment in these environments, to understand this on the different levels of governance here, and also of creating this lab culture, because lab culture is very important. And it's a tiny little detail, but I'm very fond of kitchens. So everywhere, also in my space upstairs, we have a kitchen, and this is part of this because, you know, there we sit down, there are no hierarchies, we just, you know, have a chat together, we cook together, and this is also based on specific values of sharing, and sharing knowledge, but also sharing food, and it's also sharing fun and information. And so to create these kind of informal spaces is, for me, very important. And of course, digitization in a global economy. So we also have, as designers, many interfaces to big companies, and we're working together on applied research projects with companies like Bundesdruckerei, or we've made a textile project together with Adidas or whoever. And also to have, you know, a bit of an orientation and dialogue, you know, where is the digital society heading towards, and to, you know, thinking outside the box, addressing those challenges also in dialogue with the companies. So they may need us also as a kind of sounding board, and to understand this role also for us as researchers. And of course providing evidence-based research also to fight fake news. So be very aware of this kind of data that we have to provide this to make an argument that is based on evidence. And of course this is all part of an open science agenda, so open data and open source are key principles for us. We provide most of the work that we're doing, for example, on GitHub, so that we want people to work on this collaboratively, to share the knowledge, to provide these kinds of tools that we are working with openly. And to inspire our researchers to make a meaningful contribution to the societal discourse of our future. So very much address the kind of responsibility that we have as people, as citizens, and as researchers. And so I think, in my understanding, it's quite a holistic view. It's not a narrow role of a researcher, but, you know, put us in context in a digital society. So this is a huge agenda, but it was a really good process to come up with this kind of self-reflection and understanding. And stepping back to reality, what we found like 3 years ago was this. So there's a bit of a gap between this huge agenda and these kind of very pragmatic approaches that we have. So this space used to be, like years and years and years ago, it was a print shop, I guess, so a kind of printery for the university, and then it was an archive, and not just an archive, but an archive of an archive. So nobody was basically in here, but there was just tons of paper, you know, hanging around. And we entered this, or we kind of entered this room and saw the potential, because this big space and this big open space, it's an industrial architecture, as you know. So these shed roofs are from architectural standpoint ideal, because they have a very wonderful light. So this kind of provisioning of light is for us as designers and researchers what we need to have. So we try to convince the university that this should be a place of cooperation and of doing and of practical making. And then the renovation started, and I don't want to go into details. It took like 2.5 years. And we felt like being the next Berlin airport, but anyways. So, then Bodo was working on this setup in a prototype, so in a model. We are working very much with models. Also, of course, it's an architectural model, but it was also a conceptual model for us, understanding what is the pragmatic approach to a very flexible research environment. And you see all this kind of furniture here that Bodo was designing, so he did it all on his own. And he was thinking, he will tell you much more about the kind of details of his concept, but it's all on it's all flexible architecture, you can move it around. So creating this space based on the project that I'm working here was very much our understanding, in creating an open space, but you can also have your kind of all private integration. And on the left side, behind the glass wall, there is the maker space, so all the kind of technologies that we need for prototyping are implemented there. So it's kind of a transition between, you know, the actual doing and making. You can open up the doors and have it as an understanding of a whole makerspace to really try things out. We were talking very much about openness. So what means Berlin Open Lab? And we were coming up with different principles. So we are based on open innovation also, so on this kind of working together with civil society, with companies, with other research institutions in a very open manner. We work a lot with co-design, so we invite different groups of people. We are working very much with senior citizens or with Berlin neighborhoods, where we engage in Kreuzberg, for example, in co-designing the city from bottom up, and try to understand their challenges in their specific everyday life experiences. So co-design is really sitting down together with people and not just asking them, you know, do I do a good design? Do you prefer A or B? But it's working together with them on the briefing already. So what's the issues? What are we tackling? What are we working on? Open source and open access, I was talking already about, and this is also for Berlin, also for the Technical University, very much a big agenda, having an open science agenda and putting this really into place, because this is in the pragmatics, it's an issue. Also open access is still under big discussion, but we see this as very necessary also in open education to provide these kind of resources and to understand that we are very privileged, you know, to have this kind of research environments. And so I think it's our duty also to provide these kind of resources also as open educational resources, and to provide this to other people so that they can also engage. The Berlin Open Lab is part of a big research infrastructure ecosystem that we were creating throughout, I think, the last 5 years, roundabout. So I mentioned the Einstein Center Digital Future. This was founded 2.5 years ago. This is a public-private partnership and a very interesting governance model. So all the Berlin universities are part of it, also the Charité, also Fraunhofer, and other research centers. And our understanding and the basic idea there was to get 100 new professorships on digital topics to Berlin. That was the kind of first approach. Wow, we should do something big. And then we started this off, and we are already at 50 new professorships. So we really did kind of halfway already the job, and this is huge for Berlin. So the model is that we find donors, for example, from a Stiftung, from companies, from whatever, who are paying a 2/3 for an assistant professorship wage for 6 years, and the Berlin Senate gives the rest. So they give 1/3 plus scientific staff and some project money. So it's really the kind of financial concept gives way for creating new perspectives and topics that we did not address so far throughout Berlin. So it's on Internet of Things, on mobile cloud computing, on digital sovereignty, there's one. We have one on wearable computing, and on digital education. So kind of topics that we need to address, and this public-private partnership gives us space to do so. I was also mentioning the Weizenbaum Institute. This is funded by the Ministry of Research, so it's from after Bundesebene. So we have, this is the Berlin Senate, and this is the Ministry, the Federal Ministry of Research, and this is complementary because they are addressing also the digital society, but more from a social science point of view. And there we have kind of 20 different research groups addressing more the social aspects of the digital society, like data as the new means as a new currency. We address, as I mentioned, the maker culture. We address different forms also of sustainability in the global digital society. So the research agendas are very complementary, and also the setting is very complementary, because here we start at the level of assistant professorships, and here we have the doctoral students and postdocs as an infrastructure. So coming together in these kind of two ways, from a young researcher career perspective, you could start off at your university, do your bachelor, maybe your master, then you enter the Weizenbaum Institute, do your PhD there or your postdoc, and maybe then you go to the Untitled Chapter Future and maybe apply for assistant professorship. So it's a kind of very nice career path that we have here. And the Berlin Open Lab is in the middle of it all, because here we have 3 professors from the Einstein Center Digital Future on wearable computing, on digital education, and on digital sovereignty, and we have 2 research groups from the Weizenbaum Institute, the maker culture, and digital inequality. So here they come together and work. So, and this is very important. We need those spaces where these kinds of big institutions come together on a very pragmatic level, and not just doing their kind of writing their papers, but engaging in dialogues, working on prototypes, being inspired based on the work that they are doing. So you see some of the examples here. Bodo will talk about also the setting up. So we have different kind of spaces here. So on a Tinker Kitchen, for example, we have the fiber space over there, but this will be explained by Bodo later on in detail. And we also have down the aisle another lab that is called the Multimodal Mixed Reality Design Lab, and this is not yet ready, but kind of ready, and this is on virtual reality and augmented reality. So this is a space where you can really explore these kind of new technologies of interacting with space based on virtual reality and augmented reality. So we have a kind of setting there for this specific technology, also together with the Technical University Berlin. This is the kind of board that we were putting up, so all the faculty or this department, the design department, is represented here, and also the Technical University is represented here. Of course, we have people from early stage of their research career, and also students that are part of this board of governance. And how to, so the openness is also very pragmatic. So if you want to join this research institute, you can apply for different kind of project formats. So we have the very small formats where you just want to, be part as you are part of a one-day event or some kind of very small format. You can also come with a large package saying, I have a research project that lasts 2 years and I have 5 people and we want to work here. And people come from Technical University, from University of the Arts, but also from kind of third parties if they are linked to us. And then we just see, is space available? Is there also the willingness to engage? This is very important. And are they kind of linked to this overall topic of digital production, digital society? And then it's very easy to just get access. And so I thought that this is a leftover from the renovation, but it is part of a new project, so I just learned. So it's about a robotic arm crawling kind of sand. So you always learn new things when you enter this space. And we also have a website, berlinopenlab.org. If you want to check out more information, you can do so. This is also kind of brand new. And also on your guided tour through the Berlin Open Lab, you will learn more about the topics that are represented here. I mentioned wearable computing. This is Professor Berit Greinke who's working on this, and she's working on the practice of pleating for textile fabrication, and these are interactive pleated structures. So very interesting. Also so foldables, you could say. Foldable electronics based on textiles. Very, very, very interesting. And we have Daniel Romada, who's working on digital education, and he's talking about basic literacy in terms of digital education, and is working on a kind of new artifact that is screenless. So what are screenless digital artifacts and interfaces for digital education? We have Max von Grafenstein, who's working on privacy icons and on digital sovereignty in a very pragmatic way. So what is a consumer and a citizen perspective in terms of how to live, let's say, digital sovereignty, and how to, for example, understand the GDPR and the privacy issues that are linked to this. So he's working in an experimental setting there. And we have, and I think Bianca will talk about the group Inequality and Digital Sovereignty, which is led by Bianca, so she will talk about this later. And this was also mentioned, the production possibilities of the maker culture, and this is an image of this 3D printer based on e-waste that I was mentioning before at andMethodological. So they are over there, and you will also see them next. And we have one group that is working on smart displays for smart living, so they are into kind of material research and are developing their own kind of reactive materials that they are creating that are kind of sensing in a digital environment. So if you think about all these kind of smart home concepts, so do you have kind of reactive materials that give you an idea of a specific event that is happening? So not kind of blinking displays, but kind of very subtle movements that give you an indication of there's some change in the room. So this is also an artistic approach that they are doing there. Yeah, this is kind of it. So it was a bit too long, but I hope you got some impressions and that you can understand also the setting in a better way based on this. Thank you very much.